Norman castles are the subject now of Zig-Zag.
He faced the Saxon army at Hastings. He faced the Saxon army and won. He cast the Saxons down and seized the English crown. William, Duke William the Norman. 1066, 1066, 1066 at Hastings.
So that was the end of Harold.
Yes, he was a good soldier, Harold, but he met his match in William.
And the Normans won the battle. Well, now that you were in control, what did you do?
In control? Well, I'd hardly put it like that. We had trouble even at the coronation.
What happened?
Well, he was crowned on Christmas Day, 1066, in Westminster Abbey. We were all a bit edgy, weren't quite sure that the English would accept him. And when you're nervous, you don't always think too clearly. Some of the crowd outside the Abbey started shouting and cheering. They meant to show that they welcomed William as their king, and of course they were shouting in English. And because our Norman soldiers only spoke French, they couldn't understand what was being said. They thought that the Saxons were starting a riot, so they whipped out their spears and went for them. Innocent people killed, houses burnt. A bad business.
Not a good start for King William. How did he feel about it?
He was scared stiff. It took a lot to frighten my brother, but he was shaking at his coronation. You see, we may have won the Battle of Hastings, but there were still far more Saxons in England than Normans. They outnumbered us 10-1, and William certainly didn't feel safe.
So what did he do about it?
He built castles, starting in London.
Ah, the Tower of London.
Yes, but not right away. You see, stone castles take time to build, and we were in a hurry. So to give ourselves protection as quickly as possible, we built what are called Motte and Bailey castles. Come and look at this.
Smashing model.
Well, of course it's good. I'm the man who had the Bayeux tapestry made. I don't make do with rubbish.
It's quite a simple sort of building.
That's right. You dig a ditch. You build a large mound inside that ditch. That's the motte bit. And on top of the mound, you build a wooden fort.
It's rather like the way you make sandcastles.
Sandcastles?
Yes. I expect you've nearly all done this. The first thing you do is to mark out the edge of the castle. And then you dig a ditch round the edge to protect it, just as the Normans would have done. Jody and Mark are using spades and buckets. That's what the Normans would have used, but they, of course, would have had far more men working on the job. And now the central mound, the motte, begins to rise. The final stage is to build a tower on the top of the motte. As well as the mound, you have this enclosure here.
Ah, that's the Bailey. There's not much room up here, as you can imagine. So most of the time, nearly everyone lives down here in the bailey.
Protected by this wooden fence.
That's right. You see, it takes a lot of wood to build a castle like this. So while some of the workers are digging the mound, others are chopping down the trees and turning them into pointed stakes for the fencing and beams for the wooden tower. The first castle we built in England was at Hastings, near where we landed. For that job, we had most of the army available. It took us about a week to dig the mound, and we had the whole thing finished in less than a fortnight.
Less than a fortnight? That's quick.
Yes, they were quick and simple, these castles. That meant you could cover the country with them.
And once you'd done that, you felt safe?
Hardly. The Saxons loathed us, and there were outbreaks of rebellion all over England. We had trouble up in the north, I remember. William came down on them hard, set fire to their houses, butchered their cattle. Most of them starved to death or died of cold. And then there was Hereward the Wake. He was a tough nut to crack. He made his base in the marshes, and it took us years to find him and crush him. Oh, yes, we had some difficult times. Indeed, if all the Saxons had risen together, we would have been hard-pressed, very hard-pressed.
What if the enemy launched an attack? I suppose you climbed up into the motte.
That's right. Taking these wooden steps with you. You see, it's mighty difficult for the enemy to climb that motte without the steps to help them.
So there you were, safe and sound in the motte.
Yes, fairly safe and sound. You see, these castles had one big weakness.
What's that?
Think back to the tapestry. Before William invaded England, he had to put down a rebellion and capture the rebels' castle. The defenders fought bravely, and for a time it looked as though they might hold out. But William had the solution. Fire. Wood burns, and once the walls have caught fire, there's nothing the defenders can do about it. So what do you think the answer was?
Stone?
That's right, stone, from the quarries of Normandy. But before I tell you about that, I'll go and arrange a little refreshment for us. Excuse me.
I saw those quarries when I was over in Normandy, and they're still in use. Nowadays, they have modern machinery to help them get at the stone. But in the old days, it was all done with human muscles. Once the stone was out of the quarry, it was the turn of the masons. Mason is a French word. It means someone who works on stone with tools and fashions it into the right shape. Each block had 3 marks on it. They showed which quarry it came from, which mason had worked on it, and which building it was heading for. Perhaps it would be used to build the castle at Falaise, where William was born. Perhaps it would be part of a great abbey, like the one at Jumièges. Jumièges was built before William invaded England, and 900 years ago, these walls would have echoed to the singing of the monks. When William was safely on the throne of England, he sent for his masons, and he sent for more stone from the Normandy quarries. The time had come to build, and in the years that followed, England rang to the sound of the chisel. And here's the most famous Norman building of the lot, The White Tower of William the Conqueror. The Tower of London.
I see you know it well. Is it still standing?
Certainly is.
So it should be, considering the trouble my brother went to. Do you know how thick he made the outer walls?
No.
3 yards. Thick enough to stand any siege. No one will ever break those down. Now I can offer you some good French wine.
Thank you.
Yes. I find it makes England an easier place to live in.
Tell me, Odo, have you ever been besieged?
Oh, yes.
What was it like?
Very boring most of the time. You see, likely as not, the enemy will just sit there, waiting for us to run out of food and drink.
What if they launched an attack? How did they set about it?
Well, they might try climbing the walls. Sometimes they use scaling ladders. Nasty job, that. Never did fancy it. Or they might roll a siege tower up to the walls. Another plan was to knock the walls down. They might use a battering ram, a big heavy tree trunk with a metal tip that you swing against the wall. Then again, they could fire boulders at the wall with one of the giant catapults. They worked a bit like giant seesaws. A big beam of wood on a pivot with a fixed heavy weight at one end and the boulder loaded onto the other. It was known as a trebuchet.
A trebuchet. That's what the children were making at the school. That's fantastic. Can I see how it's made?
Yeah.
Now, the main structure is soap powder cartons. And have you stuck them together?
With masking tape.
Right. And this is the beam. And what have you used for the beam?
A ruler.
A ruler. And it needs a heavy weight at one end. And you've used a yogurt carton and
Sand in it.
sand in it for the weight. And the beam is attached to the pivot here with an elastic band. And what's the pivot here?
It's a pencil sharpened at both ends.
Right. Ah, that's clever. And into the sides of the soap cartons here are fixed the tops of 2 detergent bottles.
Yeah.
Right, so I can pop the pencil in there. And that allows the main beam to pivot. And the other end of the ruler, what about this? What's that?
It's an emery board. And it gives it more spring. So it'll fire further.
Oh, I see. And at the end of the emery board is the sling. What have you used for that?
Plastic bag. Plastic
Bit
bag.
of plastic bag. So if you can put a load in there. Right. Pull down the arm. Fantastic. To fire the children's trebuchet, I just lowered the ruler with my finger. But you couldn't possibly do that with a real trebuchet. You had to winch it down with a rope. If you want to make your model as true to life as possible, have a look at what the children have done. They fixed a yogurt carton in the base, and they've been using it to winch the ruler down. A clip with half a cocktail stick. Put that in. Winch it down. A hit. It's a very fine castle, Keith. I hope it hasn't done any damage. Nope, not a scratch. It's good workmanship. King William would have been proud of you. What have you used for the round Norman arches there?
That's just plasticine with paint on it.
And I like the texture of the stone. What have you used for that?
It's water, paint, polystyrene and sand.
Very realistic. Can I have a look round the inside of the castle? Ah, you've left the back of the castle off so you can see inside. That's a good idea. There's not a lot going on at the moment, though.
Well, that's the next part of our project, to see what's going on in the rooms.
So you're going to add some more floors and rooms?
Yeah.
Great. The children were wondering what goes on in the different rooms of the castle. I'd like to know as well.
Very well. That can easily be arranged. How would it be if I showed you the plans of my new stone keep?
Perfect.
Plans of my new castle, please. You see, we've been having trouble with the Saxons down in Kent, and this will help to keep them in order. Thank you. Let's take it over to the table. Now, this is what the outside of the castle will look like.
Looks solid enough.
And this is the inside. This is what it would look like if you took one of the walls away. Now, let's start in the basement. Right at the very bottom were the prisoners in a dungeon. And very dark and nasty it was. Just the place for people you don't like. And next to the dungeon was the most important part of the castle. What was that?
Can't think.
The well. If you're being besieged, you can't last long without a water supply. Got to have a well. And you also need plenty of food. Here are the food stores. And I always take good care to see that supplies don't run low.
What's above the storeroom?
The kitchen and the guard room. And on the next floor is the Great Hall. This is the main room, where most people eat their meals and where many sleep at night.
Where are the beds?
Beds? They sleep on the floor, curl up in the straw.
What about the lord of the castle? Where will you sleep when you stay there?
Oh, there are a few separate bedrooms up here on the top floor. That's where I'll be. I'm past sleeping on the floor.
I see you've got lavatories next to the side walls. What about the bathrooms?
Bathrooms? What's that? We get out a bath tub once a year and fill it with hot water.
Once a year?
Oh, yes, I know your sort. You're one of these soft women. You want 2 baths a year. Well, what do you think of my new plan?
Very impressive.
Brother John! Oh, drat the fellow, where is he? Well, I'd better put it away myself. We can't risk having it mislaid. Excuse me.
I wonder how you'd have liked living in a castle. You'd have had to make do without TV and radio, of course. Tell me, Odo, what's a castle like in winter? Does it get cold?
Oh, yes, especially in December. I don't mind telling you that on Sundays I put on a second pair of tights to keep myself warm.
You wear tights?
Yes, of course, don't you?
Yes, most of the time. Mostly I do.
Well, everybody does, Saxon and Norman alike. When the wind's whistling through the shutters, you need them.
I think I'd freeze to death in a castle.
You'd soon get used to it. You see, there's always a blaze in the main hall to keep the chill out. That's where we all assemble at mealtimes. The cooks are being hard at work in the kitchens all day, and now they're fetching food to the table. When all is ready, the steward blows his horn to summon us to dinner. That's a sound a Norman loves to hear. And by the time you've drunk a pint of wine and put a few chicken legs inside you, somehow the winter doesn't seem to matter quite so much.
And what do you talk about at table?
What do fighting men always talk about? The past. And sooner or later, our thoughts turn to the field of Hastings. And we lift our goblets and we make the rafters ring with our singing. Great days. Great days.
He faced the Saxon army at Hastings. He faced the Saxon army and won. He cast the Saxons down and seized the English crown. William, Duke William the Norman. 1066, 1066, 1066 at Hastings.